Yeah, we are live. Okay.
In the World Wide Web.
Yeah, we are live. Okay. So, hello again, everyone. Welcome. This is our 5th episode. We are on a roll, and we have not missed a week, and this is really huge. And I think it's gonna pick up with the other groups, and however else we're gonna continue working like this. I'm really glad this is happening. So welcome back once again for anyone who's new here, watching this later on. My name is Serkan. Everyone has kindly agreed to make this happen every week, kind of at the same time. And we're talking about all things Meteor, from very early on things to the really advanced stuff. Sorry for the movement back there. I have my cleaning lady over, and she says her job is more important than mine. I could, just disagree with that. So she's right. Okay. So, Christian, you have taken notes about some of the topics that we have decided to talk about this week. But before doing that, Rob shared the link with us, a URL from a site that's called MindMeister that helps you chart mind maps online, to work on ideas, to have ideas sprout other ideas, and keep their relationships in link, and try to picture what's in our head. It's a great tool. So Rob is going to take a few moments to talk about that and introduce us both the idea, the tool, and how he has been using it in his projects to increase his productivity. So please go ahead.
Okay, let me just share this screen.
I think I can make your screen permanently on here. Yes, okay.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so we use mind mapping as a tool to help a group of people come together on ideas, to help us see very, very quickly relationships and patterns, and to move things around into more logical places in a collaborative way. So I've set up this this initial mind map as a starting point, not really for me to drive forward, but for you guys to drive forward, as a way to capture ideas and thoughts around the project, which we're obviously going to do. And I don't really want to spend a lot of this time in this session talking about mind mapping or this tool in particular. It's quite easy to use, and I really encourage you just to get in there on that shared link and give it a go. Where I'll just go through a few key areas for you, because I think it's probably good if you explore it yourselves. So I've started off by creating this central starting point, which is what our group app is all going to be about. And around that, I have started off, I've put 3 things that I think spring out of what that means. And there may be a lot more. As I say, I just want to start this off for you. So I've said here functional parts. So what do I mean by that? Well, that's a very high level view of all the things that will go into our app to make it work. I've put here needs a name. So we'd like to call it something, and here's a good place where you can very quickly put your ideas in, and people can look at them and say, yeah, I like that, or no. So I might click on that box, press the tab key, which opens up a new link off that one, and I might say, you've seen me use this one, Meteor U. Yeah, maybe that's a good name. So you could obviously all put in ideas for names. Here we need to identify those. I think, Serkan, you said two people who should really be driving this forward. So here we could maybe nominate or volunteer if we want to actually be a part of that governing body, as I've called it. So really, it's a case of you guys go. Oh, I see someone already has added Slack integration. Hey, that would be cool. There is a little menu here you can slide in and out, which lets you do things like add comments to a thing. So for Slack integration, I've clicked on that. I can add a comment, and I might say, cool. There we go. There's my comment. So we're getting a lot of background noise there. Well, really, that's pretty much all I want to say about this. I want you guys to start using it. Hello, I'm getting a lot of noise again.
No.
Is that okay, Serkan? Just as a very quick intro.
Yeah, it is great. It is great. Thank you for sharing this. Could you take a moment to tell us about how you use this in your real actual projects and how you benefit from it?
It's something that's fairly new to us. But we've recently started a new project. Well, I say recently, it's probably a year ago now. One of the problems we have is that, and I suspect it's quite similar to the issues that we as a mentor group have, is getting ideas from a lot of people together and quickly deciding which ones are ones we want to keep and which we may want to defer. And for a development project, this is quite a good way of taking a very high level concept and quite quickly splitting off individual tasks which can be assigned to people or to small groups to actually code. So like the login. Okay, so someone might say, we want Google, maybe we want password, and it becomes quickly then quite easy then to say, okay, when we write the card which explains how the login is to work, then we need to ensure that that card contains the information that we want Google sign in, and we want conventional password authentication, sort of fairly standard Meteor sign in. And this obviously works for all these things. Homepage, maybe we want some blurb. You're all familiar with the English word blurb? Something which basically something which describes what's going on in this site. So very quickly gets a casual visitor up to speed with what this site is all about. And maybe the home page actually should have something else on it. Maybe it should have links to the forums. I don't know. I mean, basically, it's just a way of very quickly splitting ideas off, and in a development team gets you very quickly to a set of tasks which you can give to people. That's about it, really.
Okay, well, I mean, thank you very much for this, Rob, because I really find this very useful. Back in the day when I used to use, desktop apps for most of my development workflow, I used to, install a tool called FreeMind, which is open source, but which unfortunately is a desktop app, and that kind of does not fit my workflow nowadays. But seeing this really sparked that idea back again, and we have actually done a great job here to describe us and walk us through a practical example, namely our own project here. And now here we are actually doing actual progress. Without using a tool like this, we could be, resorting back to things like GitHub issues. We have actually tried a few weeks back, and we haven't made much progress. There are obviously a lot of ideas being jotted down there, but you don't kind of actually grasp the intertwining relations between those ideas, so they kind of float in the air. And the same goes with Trello too. It's actually a better high-level tool to make an initial design, nonetheless, but still it doesn't include this overview of relations and how parts fit together. And it just took us a few minutes to get this thing going. I mean, you've been talking about that. I just jotted down a few ideas in there, and I see Chris and Lucas started working on it at the same time. This is a great tool to both inspire new ideas, to get them started, and get a clear shape of where you're heading, or where tasks are cluttering together, perhaps where other parts of the project needs more attention, etc. So thank you for sharing this. I do vote for using this, and even starting off with your initial notes down there. So thank you again.
Cool, thank you.
Chris, you have, I think, compiled us a few of the questions that people have been meaning to ask us today. Would you remind us one of them?
Yeah, sure. We should start maybe with Rico's question.
Okay.
Was there, or I mean, this was a good question, I think.
Rico, would you like repeating the question for us?
The question was how to make.
We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can.
No, okay. My question is how you, what are the best practice to make a Meteor app communicate with an external software? I also think to enterprise ERP software like SAP, for example, or InVision. What's the best practice? Because researching on the internet, I find API, RESTful APIs, SOAPs, microservices, and all of them seems to do the same thing. So it's difficult for me to make a decision which one I have to look at.
Okay. Well, it's a great question, because nowadays the software we develop, cannot easily stand on its own 2 feet. It needs other kind of support from external applications, external services, like login, for example. Just as we discussed a few minutes ago, I mean, providing just a single password type login is not sufficient for today's apps. You need to also rely on an external service like Google's. You may want to be sending batch emails, and you may want to rely on a service like Mailgun for that, or you may want to query address data from an external API, or an enterprise service like SAP, or something of the likes. And most of these systems expose APIs on different transport layers, or on different abstraction levels, or just basically doing the same thing using different technologies, just to offer choice to the developer. And that's basically it, actually. If you are meaning to provide your own API endpoints, that's a different story. We can talk in a few minutes. But if you want to integrate with an existing API and trying to decide on what your best choice would be, I'd say go with the more modern and more feature complete ones. For example, very mature software like SAP, they expose RESTful services, they expose SOAP APIs, they even expose some very proprietary endpoints based on some exchange of standardized text input and output. And there are also some other integration standards just developed for industry-specific implementations, like financial industry has very specific things to exchange banking information, for example. There's this thing called EDI, electronic document interchange. It's basically exchange of text. But still, they have their own standards that you have to conform to. On an existing endpoint that you want to integrate, my personal choice would be to go with the more modern ones. For example, if there's an API that exposes a REST endpoint, and then there's the same API exposing a SOAP endpoint, I'd prefer to go with the REST API as long as it's feature-rich, as long as it allows me to do what I really want it to do, because that makes my tooling easier. It is easier for me to incorporate a REST client in my workflow, in my application. It's easier to test. It's easier to develop on. But in the Meteor ecosystem, you actually do have choice to do all of these things. For example, in a recent project, I had to use a SOAP endpoint, and I just searched through NPM to see what options I have available there. I found a great package. I even found out that somebody from the Meteor community has actually wrapped that within an atmosphere package. Not that it's not going to be necessary any longer, but at the time it was important. It was a breeze to use it. We are using REST endpoints all the time. I'm sure you have used it. It's really easy. We have the low-level HTTP call utility there, the methods built into Meteor's core. So that basically is a really easy to, almost callback-free utility to query REST endpoints. So yeah, the answer is actually up to the choices you already have on your plate. But if you are talking about exposing endpoints, that's a different story. Because now Meteor also has the DDP there. It's a great addition. And I believe, if you think your application is going to be more or less a closed environment, and you really don't require exposing too many public APIs, basing everything on DDP is a valid option, because DDP is a great protocol that allows you to natively build apps that mimic the way Meteor itself works within its own client-server architecture. And it's really easy to connect other applications, non-Meteor applications, to a DDP endpoint. We have DDP clients for iOS, Android, desktops. We have JavaScript DDP clients, one that was called Asteroid, I suppose. It's really powerful. It's almost native. We also have a package called CVC Job Collections. It actually includes a native DDP client, which is really great. It helps you create external services. Such that you can, build your whole application around the microservice architecture, however micro or macro they are. You can easily separate out your services and interconnect them using DDP, and even expose their own methods externally. But of course, this is a business world, and if you are building an application where your clients are external bodies, and they say, well, we don't want to learn anything new, and DDP is off your plate, it's really easy for you to expose REST endpoints as well. Currently, as it stands, there are a few very powerful packages around building REST APIs. There's even one that automatically exposes a REST API for each of your collections, for example. just add the package, write just a line or two of code, and that's it. You have an API. There are some that allow you more control over how you expose your APIs or whatever you do. There's even the built-in HTTP web app package. The web part of Meteor, it does export, it does expose the Connect API so that you can actually build application on URL endpoints that you see if the incoming request is an HTTP post, it's an HTTP get, or whatever it is, and you can it hands you off the request and response so that you can deal with it and alter it, and then give it back to the client however you like. So it's again basically about requirements and choices. To sum it up, to summarize it, if you are building an application, mostly you are going to be using from your other parts of the application. I'd suggest stick with TDP. It's because you already are using it, because it is already very native to your environment. But if you're going to expose APIs publicly to the external world, and you just don't want anyone to learn new stuff, you can easily expose REST endpoints. And that's basically what the web services cover there, RESTful and API keywords that you have in your question. But the SOAP thing is, kind of the last resort. It's something you would want to use only if someone's like, okay, you're gonna have to use this, or the world is gonna blow up in a few days. It's not that kind of situation there, actually. Believe me, it is. But this is life. It can happen. It does happen. I know companies who have never heard of things such as REST, and SOAP is like, oh, this is brand new. This is a service-oriented architecture. SOAP is the way to go. It's so 90s, but it's so new to them. And that's something you have to understand. Big companies are sometimes. It's really hard to shift gears in that, because you have to change the mindset of not a few people but thousands of people, and a huge ecosystem. So be prepared for that, but it's not something to be feared of. And VM already provides opportunities for you to leverage there, and that's about it. Okay?
So to recap, there's no big differences but the technology they use.
Yeah, it's basically the technology, and you have the choice over what technology to use there. Okay. It depends on your tooling and your preferences. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. By the way, Rob, I think I have been presenting you all along, so you're not very famous. Okay. So next. Guys?
Yeah, there was no other question coming, so do you have any questions, guys? I have two, but maybe other ones first?
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm now building a filter which, so I have a collection which has a username and an age, so we just have a username and an age, and I now want to filter I have some cards like Pinterest cards, I want to filter them that they only show, for example, people aged 20 to 30. And I can accomplish that with MongoDB, I think. The only question I have is how to re-render the view. So is there a command in Meteor to re-render the view that when I click on filter, it shows me only 20 to 30 years old people?
Okay. To recap this, if I understood your question correctly, what you're asking is, when you query for a certain subset of the data, how do you take that and refresh your view such that it represents the same subset of the data?
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
Well, it depends basically on the view technology you're using and how you're wiring up your data. Now, for the sake of this question, I think I'm safely assuming that we're talking about Blaze here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and we're talking basically about a template structure. where a template has a helper that takes the data, hands it to the template as a data context, and that's a query actually. And then within that query, you have an each iterator, like each players, each, you know, blah, blah, and that prints down a list that it receives. Well, there are multiple ways of doing this. The first and most obvious way would be to provide the helper function, template.myTemplateName.helpers. Create a helper name, for example, filtered players or filtered. What was your use case again? Was it players?
Sure. I'm not showing in the framework. I'm showing each, and I show all the usernames. So I have Peter, I have Dominic, I have Marcel, all those names.
Okay.
And they all have an age also. So they have a profile.age. And what I now want to do is I want to do a filter that when I select 18 to 30 years old, it only shows me 18 to 30 years old people in this view. And what I understand is I can do that with MongoDB, with some queries in MongoDB to source the data. But what I didn't understand is how do I re-render the view. So when I click on the filter button, on click, that it then changes the data showing, you know?
Okay. Well, the confusing part there is probably your filter, where the filtering happens, is either on a different template or within the same template, but on different parts, so that they either share a top-level same context, or they share different helpers as their contexts.
Okay.
How to have them talk to each other. For that, you can use different tools. For example, the most basic, most obvious, but the one you basically should not be doing anymore, is using a session. For example, you could you use a helper on your filter. Let's say it's a select, or it's just input where you input to the age. You use a template helper there to get that input and set that to a session variable. And on the other side, on the helper that takes in the data context, you could use session.get to get whatever it is and feed it to your query.
Okay.
So it would basically be something like players.find age greater than equal to session.get age criteria. Okay.
Okay. And then I just do return like before, because with return I
can get data to since the whole thing is reactive, what reactivity means there is whenever something changes about your data, that's the query there, and that depends on the session, and the session depends on the filter. Anything changes here gets propagated down to the other thing there.
Okay. And it changes automatically, right? Because Meteor is reactive.
Everything happens automatically there. Okay. And when once you manage to do that, you want to improve on how you want to do that. And that's why I said you should not be using session, because session is something globally available to the whole app. So you use reactive vars or reactive dict. Oops, sorry guys.
No problem.
Okay. You use something called a session var, or a reactive var or reactive dict to make sure that the changes are scoped within a single template, so that anything outside that template does not have to be concerned about what's going on in there. But that's a little more advanced for you. So that's why
what I know did is I have one helper which gets the whole collection and the template, and it shows the data.
Okay.
So I do profile.first name and shows the data. And now so this works all fine. Now what I think to do is I write a second helper for this template, and I write inside of there the MongoDB query with the sort by age.
Don't do that.
Okay.
Use the same helper. The same helper, but it has to rely on the session variable that is managed by the event on your filter.
Okay. The click event, right? The click event. When I click on something.
Yeah, you have a submit event or a change event on your input. That's an event handler. What it does is session.set this variable, whatever you have named it. For example, session.set filter the value of the input, and then within your original helper, instead of doing players or users.find, you do users.find profile.age greater than or equal to session.get my filter.
Okay, session.get my filter. Okay.
Does it make sense?
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, cool.
Okay. The next question I have is, or the last question is there any possibility to see the code of the packages you install? So I have 20 packages installed, which are working fine, but one, as I said, this admin panel is not working. So can I access the code and look what they're doing, or is it not possible? Because I don't find it in any structure or folder.
Okay. Well, the package, the code to the packages that you import into your project are stored elsewhere in your computer. It's usually stored under your user folder.
Okay.
But not in a very easy format that you would be understanding, or it's not even tied to your project root. Therefore, the easiest way to go through the code of those packages is to actually take a look at their GitHub repository. And that's what we're doing. And if you want to change the code and try that, what you should do is actually forking the package code and using that fork.
Okay.
So to do that,
because it works, but it don't show up the data. So I think it calls the wrong Mongo collection or something. It's like a Yugi Band's admin panel installed, and it works, and it worked before, but then I changed stuff, and now it don't work anymore. That's the problem.
Well, I would probably take a look at my own code before blaming the admin package for that, because
I think so. I just want to understand the connection, So.
Oh yeah, the connection is this. It's the admin package is basically a utility for you to present your database structure in terms of pages that you can either use list data or to change the data as forms. And if it works for you in a basic setup and it suddenly stops working, the problem most probably is somewhere around the code. I mean, don't get me wrong, there may actually be something wrong with the package itself. But before jumping to that conclusion, you should eliminate the possibility that your code is breaking something there. And it's really hard to make a general comment on what may have been broken there, because every package, every piece of code works independently and in a different way. What we could do is here, basically, try to reproduce that same problem either in a small repository and work collaboratively on that together on Slack or here, or just take a stab at the code.
Okay. Yeah, I tried. It was just not visible for me, packages, So.
Okay, the packages itself, the package itself won't be visible to you in your typical development workflow, but that's what I actually do oftentimes. Whenever I want to include a package in my project, I actually take a look at the source code itself first to see what it is doing, and to see actually if I really do depend on the package itself, because sometimes the package is a generalized version that caters to a lot of use cases. And it so happens that your use case is a very specific one that the package does address. But you could live without many of the complexities of the package. So in such cases, I actually take a piece of the code from there, or just get some inspiration, and then apply it within my own code base. But for quickly prototyping an app, or if you just don't mind the overhead there, you can still, download the clone repository to your computer, and see how it works, and that gives you a better idea of how to use the package itself. Because sometimes documentation does not provide you all the the information about all the inner workings. But once you take a look at the source code and try to figure out how it actually works under the hood, it may give you much better ideas, much leaner ideas to use the package itself, because of the lack of documentation. And perhaps you can then, contribute to that package as with improving their documentation.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks.
Right. Thank you for the question. Let us all know how it goes with both the package and the filter problem. And if you cannot figure it out, just drop us a line on the Slack channel and let's work it out together. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Welcome, Kayas. How are you?
Hey, sorry, I'm half an hour late.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. Let's take another question.
I think Henry, who has just left, wanted to talk about app structure.
Oh yes, okay, that was definitely a great question. Okay. Well, the question was how to structure our apps, like how to use the packages or the imports or the folders, etc. Well, there's kind of a bad news and a good news situation going on nowadays, at least for a few weeks, is that Meteor is about to release a new version in a few weeks. So, as it currently stands, the way the best practices about structuring an app is about to change. But that does not mean that the way we have been doing until now is irrelevant. It's not. Basically, for small to mid-sized projects or projects that you work on your own, for example, you could still stick to the current best practices and current paradigms of structuring your apps. And if you think your app is outgrowing you as a sole developer and you need to bring in more developers, or your app is outgrowing its own premises and it's becoming something huge, then you could start making use of the new features that Meteor 1.3 is going to land in our labs soon. So let's begin with the older, not to say older, but the canonical way of structuring our apps. First of all, as you know, there's a folder structure and naming priorities. Like the deeper within the folder structure your files are, the earlier they get loaded. And if your file name is a main.js, it gets loaded last. So it's like an entry point, waiting for everything else to load first. Or anything you put within a Meteor startup block gets to run after Meteor has actually loaded all the sources. Or if something has a file name that orders your files within the same directory higher up somewhere, then it gets to be loaded first. So it's kind of a game there to get to load whatever you want to load first. But if you can wrap your head around that, then begins the discussion of, okay, where to place the files. Well, my preference is usually to modularize the app as much as possible, such that I place things that are closer to each other, or things that I can actually take away from the app in one piece and put in another app within the same enclosure, within the same folder structure. I keep that together. For example, if we are talking about a commenting feature, and that it has a commenting template structure and then a separate comments collection, for example, and its publication and its subscription and its, for example, I don't know, mailing notifications, etc. I can devise it in a way that it basically is a standalone app. It basically gets enclosed in a single folder. What that means is, if I can manage to achieve that goal, I can make that a package so that I have more control on the load order. For example, I can make my other packages depend on that package specifically. So now it's a new way to organize the app structure. What I'm introducing here, the use of packages. Instead of making the whole app within a single root directory or server or client directory, I take away some of the pieces and put them in packages, and then use them wherever I need them. It opens up the possibility to publish it and use it from different apps just by making typing Meteor at my cool commenting package. That being said, Meteor 1.3 is introducing imports, which is the standard canonical way of structuring JavaScript apps in general, which allows you to put everything aside in a folder called imports, and they don't get loaded to your app, loaded by your app, unless somewhere in your app you say import this from that file within the imports directory. That has pros and cons. The disadvantage is you have to write a few more lines. You have to explicitly take in pieces of functionality that is exposed somewhere, stashed in your imports directory. But the good news is that allows you explicit control. You don't worry about where you are putting your files. You know your file is somewhere, and you know you need some functionality from that file, and you know that unless you explicitly want to use it, it's not going to interfere with the rest of your app. And you also know that it is going to be there when you need it to be there. So the way moving forward, by the way, it doesn't cancel out the packages strategy. It doesn't cancel out the bi-directory loading or load orders, etc. It just is an addition to how Meteor works, and you can switch to that gradually. But the way going forward is, if you can wrap your head around how imports and exports work, and if you can wrap your head around how ES 2015 works in general, and what's new in the JavaScript language, you will see that both the tools, the editors, and the IDEs that we are working with help us use the new language features, and you will see that your apps are more structured. But basically, if you're working on a hack away on a weekend project, or if you're working on something that's not gonna be more than a few thousand lines perhaps, or more than a few files, it's perfectly okay to not take a look at the imports or exports at all and use a contained folder structure or a few packages structure. So I know this is this sounds like okay, too many options and what to choose. Well, the answer is there's no one single de facto way of doing things. You have choices. The better choice would be to get yourself acquainted and used to using imports, so that it's just something you do without thinking. I know it's a little overhead in the beginning, but believe me, it's going to save you a lot of time and effort and maintenance pains down the line. And I hope that answers Henry's question, because he's dropping out frequently. Henry, if you're watching this, let us know if we have been able to successfully answer your question. Okay, what next?
I think there was another question from Henry regarding CSS styling in the new React Meteor way.
Sorry. Oh, CSS, right? Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, to repeat the question, Henry was wondering, especially if we are using React, and things are getting contained within components, and UI components pieces should be able to live on its own, not depending on the outside world and not being interfered by the outside world. How to manage our CSS? Because CSS is, well, to be blunt, is an inferior piece of technology compared to what we have at hand with JavaScript and the likes. And CSS has this first initial C standing for cascading. That means something higher up can affect the things below the tree. And things can add up, things can cancel out each other at any time, so it may quickly become a mess. Well, I mean, I'm not exactly a web designer or a web developer in that sense. I'm definitely not an expert in the UI. But what I've come to accept is first you have to understand how CSS works before even coming up with innovative solutions about that. You have to know how to namespace your CSS classes and how to structure them in tree structures, and how to combine them in a way that you know how specificity works. You know how if you inline a CSS element, it can cancel out something. How if you use an exclamation point important declaration, how it can override something. How a CSS on a class name can override a CSS a CSS rule defined on a tag or a property, can override each other. So the main takeaway is you have to know how specificity on CSS works, so that which CSS rule wins over the others. Once you grasp that, it's easier to decide on how to structure your styles. Well, luckily, we have technologies like Less or Stylus or SCSS and SAS. What they basically do is provide some of JavaScript-like functionality, some logic into styles, such that instead of writing long and wieldy and verbose rules and classes and styles, you can group them. You could introduce variables. You could introduce things like mixins and structure them like that. But once that is not also enough, like once you begin developing components, like the React paradigm is nudging you towards, you quickly realize that the CSS living outside somewhere in the application can affect the way the component works. So to overcome that, there are two things you should make sure you're doing. First, never ever base your logic on CSS. CSS is for visuals, like for looks, basically. So, for example, say you are using Blaze. I know this is a React conversation, but bear with me. Say you're using Blaze and you're creating a new event handler, and you say, okay, why don't we set a session variable to our filter if an input with the class myFilterInput gets changed? Well, that's a bad practice, in my opinion. Instead, depend on other properties that HTML itself provides you with. For example, there are data properties, data dash something that's perfectly viable and developed for that purpose, and use the class names for styling the input. For example, you could give a name like important input. Instead of using that to get a value, you could use that to convey importance. So you should kind of change the way why you are using CSS. Instead of using to access components and manipulate components, you use it solely for visual aspects, and then use other properties of HTML for actually working on your logic. That being said, React introduces us with the concept of inlining classes. And that has stirred lots of controversy in web development. Bro. I mean, lots of people said, "Whoa, okay, you cannot do inline styles," and we were against that, until yesterday. Why? Well, the thing is, React is changing and questioning a lot of paradigms. Some of them work, some of them may not work. It depends on your personal preference too. So inlining CSS does actually work when you want to specifically scope some visual styles to a piece of component. But then when the styles become kind of large, when they become growing, and they start including logic within them, like active, inactive kind of thing, like disabled, enabled, blah blah. Or perhaps depend on the states. You quickly begin realizing that inlining is not the solution. It can be a solution to a lot of problems, but not to all of them. Luckily, JavaScript world has introduced few JavaScript libraries to work with styles and to tame them. And I think that's they are the best options right now we have at hand. I cannot name one specific library that has to be our favorite one, because they all have their own preferences of things, their own opinions on things. But I'd say give them a go, because since we're using JavaScript for everything contained within a single file to represent a component with the React paradigm, then why not do the same thing with the styles? I know it's a paradigm shift. I know it's controversial. I know the designers may not be really happy with that idea, but it all depends on your project. It depends on your requirements and depends on your skills. However you feel comfortable with that also. So it's perfectly okay, and sometimes even very much preferable to use one of those new JavaScript libraries that help you master and tame your styles within the context of your React component. And you will also quickly find that there are JavaScript styling solutions applicable to other technologies like Angular, like Blaze, for example. You don't have to be working with React to make use of such libraries. So even on Atmosphere, there's, I think, a package that exposes JSS, like JavaScript style sheets. That was interesting. But there are better alternatives with the React world that are natively working with React. So, take a look at them, take a stab at them. If it works for you, fine. If it doesn't work for you, take a step back, see how you're doing with the basic understanding of your CSS and how it works. Refresh your knowledge on that arena, and then take another step forward. And that's about all I can say in that. Well, Henry is again dropped away. So, okay, we'll see if he comes along and says, no, you have not answered me, or yeah, you have. Any other questions?
Yeah, there was the last question about the different kinds of schemas you can use in Meteor. So it seems like the standard is still simple schema, but on the astronomy package, there's a notice which says if this package was around when I created simple schema, I would have used it instead of creating simple schema. So I wondered why is everyone using simple schema and not astronomy? And in the future, there's also a shift from MongoDB to GraphQL. And in GraphQL, you can define schemas. So is there another shift to GraphQL schemas, or will you use GraphQL with astronomy or something like that?
Okay. Well, to begin answering that question, I'd first like to say that the latest Meteor Night was a few hours ago, and it's up on YouTube now. And you should definitely watch that. It does not enter into too many specifics, but it does give you a general idea about where Meteor is heading. And Matt Berglis has actually spelled out the time frame. He said 6 to 12 months. And if a guy like that says that, you have to take it seriously. So what that tells us is you don't have to worry too much about GraphQL within the next 6 months, unless you're using already existing solutions like Mantra, like Loka, developed by Arunada. If you're feeling adventurous, or I mean, not adventurous, that's a wrong choice of words, sorry. If you're feeling innovative, perhaps, you'd like to jump on the GraphQL train today, and there's nothing holding you back from doing that. Me personally, I haven't yet seen specific interest in that for my current applications. It's out there. I know it's doable. But getting back to today and what's available officially by MDG today, Meteor today, we have a data layer based on MongoDB. You can extend that using packages on Atmosphere. Like, for example, there's this one called AnyDB. You can use that to access any data source out there. But basically, let's rewind back a bit to the MongoDB world, and the currently available packages that let you design schemas. Simple schema has been around for ages now, and that's why it has been so widely used, and it has a lot of its problems already solved. It's rock solid. It's extensible. It performs well. And in fact, soon it's going to be transitioned into NPM for any JavaScript app out there to use, not just Meteor. So that's a very strong and valid motive to stick to simple schema, because it's going to be a general tool, which also will have some kind of interoperability or maybe transpilation to GraphQL. So it would be safe to say that if you go with simple schema today, a transition to GraphQL tomorrow may be built upon what you already have there. And simple schema may be able to help you in doing that. Also, Matt Berglis' talk was about the transition paths. He said that you could use Blaze and Angular and React together within the same app today, and switch out pieces for other technologies. And once it comes out, you will be able to use Apollo, the name of the new data layer by Meteor. You will be able to switch out parts of your app for Apollo, and they could coexist together. So it's really safe to assume that whatever you start off doing today will still be valid and easily transitionable to newer technologies. That being said about simple schema, astronomy is wildly really powerful. It does a lot of things. But the main difference between simple schema and Atmosphere is that simple schema is what it is. It's a package for defining a schema and validating a document structure against that schema. And then if you want to bind your collections to that, then there's a package called collection2. Then if you want to add behaviors to that, then there's a package called collection behaviors. Then if you want to bind helpers to that, then you have a package called collection helpers. So you see, that's an ecosystem built around that. Astronomy, on the other hand, is aspiring to be a rock-solid ORM tool, that an object relational mapping tool that takes your document structures, that your data objects, and mapping them to your database and filling everything in between, providing you with helpers, providing you with events and hooks and behaviors, providing you with schema definitions. In fact, astronomy author Jaggi has publicly announced that he will be supporting GraphQL as a first-class citizen, as a first-class feature of astronomy. So there you go. Whatever you choose today, either simple schema and its ecosystem around that, or astronomy, you will be able to use GraphQL whenever it lands. So astronomy is really powerful. So it contains all the tools you have. The only downside is it has less of a history than simple schema. It's not new, but it definitely is newer. It's been introduced much more recently. So it's easy to say its vision has not been accomplished yet. It has a great vision. Astronomy 2.0 is about to be released in a few weeks. It's really exciting. I mean, I've taken a look at its documentation, a few of the examples. It looks really great. And even better thing is, astronomy author Jaggi and simple schema author Aldid are actually in contact. If you take a look at their GitHub issues, they are commenting on each other's projects. And Sashgustu Valley is also in the loop. He is actually trying to get them to agree on some sort of interoperability, some sort of common ground, so that when you decide to use one of the packages, you could still leverage the feature set that is introduced by the other package. For example, you could take simple schema. For example, you could take astronomy, translate that to simple schema, use the simple schema outcome to validate your methods, since the Meteor guide has introduced a way of building methods around simple schema and making simple schema the de facto way of validating client input. You could leverage an astronomy to simple schema converter to use assess on your client validations, and then astronomy itself to do the actual server-side validation, for example. So that's a perfectly valid way to move forward. And then when GraphQL comes out with the Apollo stack, you could take parts of the application, perhaps even use a native translator from astronomy or simple schema to GraphQL schemas and leverage that. Or if you're feeling more innovative, you could skip all that in 6 months, probably, maybe a little more. Just start off with GraphQL itself. So there you go. You still have options. The good thing is, you know now that you have the peace of mind to know that whatever you go with today will still be valid tomorrow and will be interoperable and even switchable to the newer technology. So that's my take on what
Questions.
I see. Yeah, sure.
Can I barge in for a second?
Okay.
The thing is, GraphQL has nothing to do with simple schema or astronomy in itself, because GraphQL is basically a way of writing things just like SQL. You know, there is MySQL, there is PostgreSQL. Both are servers and clients of the SQL query language. It's the same with GraphQL. GraphQL is not a query; is a query language. It's not a schema definition tool. It's basically just a specification, in my from my point of view, because it's just a way of writing things. Basically, it cannot replace any packages, I think.
Yeah, kind of true. But I have to admit it's kind of incomplete, because GraphQL does actually allow you to design mutations on your data objects. So it allows you to provide the schema for an insert. or for an update, for that matter. And then you can use that schema to actually validate that input. So
I did not know that, sorry.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's not specifically designed for that purpose. The initial purpose for GraphQL was to be able to combine multiple data sources as a representation of whatever the client needs in terms of data. It's like the CQRS paradigm, like command query responsibility segregation paradigm, but it's even better. But it does allow you to define the schemas for your mutations. It's not the most mature aspect of the framework, but it is on moving forward on its way. Nonetheless, as I said, both simple schema and astronomy will hopefully be interoperable with GraphQL schemas. And when the time comes, you can decide for yourself to stick with all of them, parts of them, only one of them. But the clear advantage with GraphQL would be the way to access multiple data endpoints. Currently, astronomy and simple schema are both designed around the MongoDB paradigms. Not specifically tied to that. I mean, certainly not with simple schema. But GraphQL will be allowing you to take, for example, a Postgres database and a MongoDB database and Redis store, and perhaps an external API, a web service, and combine them all together to struct a view for your client, data view for your client, and the way back to change the data. For example, exposing a Meteor method, exposing a direct access to a MongoDB database, exposing an API. So in that sense, GraphQL will be much more powerful. And there's one really important aspect of GraphQL and Meteor's new data layer, Apollo. They have decided to make the data access non-reactive by default. Currently, as it stands, Meteor's data access is reactive by default, and that's, you know, sometimes that may raise concerns on horizontal scalability. And then a valid question is, does every app require that kind of reactivity? For example, you store a list of products on your database, you have an e-commerce site, and you actually add a new product once a year. And would you actually want that product information to be reactive, to be, you know, streamed live from your server from a merge box, such that a connected client has to be tracked? I mean, no, basically. But that depends on your app requirements. And what Apollo, Meteor's new data layer, does in terms of opinion is to say, well, reactivity is, you know, a feature. That should be something you opt in for, not something you opt out for. So reactivity is a first-class citizen with Apollo and GraphQL there, but it's opt-in. So that perhaps a different paradigm to, you know, get used to beforehand, you know, during this 6 months on we're waiting for. Yeah, Chris, you had a question, but I have to interrupt you. Sorry. Okay.
No, we just chatted about it. I just want to understand what's the difference between GraphQL and MongoDB. Oh. But Lucas already answered me, so it's not a difference. It's just some, when I understood it right, something above it which you can connect to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. GraphQL is not a database. It's something that sits between the database and the application and the client. Mm-hmm. MongoDB is the database itself. So GraphQL will be able to make your application talk to MongoDB, as well as make it able to talk to other databases like MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, Redis.
Oh, this is nice for APIs to connect it with third parties, or? This is the point, or?
Yeah.
Or what is the advantage of it?
Okay, let me give you a clear example. A few hours ago, I was chatting with someone from Brent Abrams, actually. Hi, Brent. From Meteor forums. He has a project at hand. He was deciding to use he was trying to decide if Neo4j is something that he should be investing in. What Neo4j is, it's a graph database. For those of you who don't know what a graph database is, it's still a database like MongoDB that works with document structures, but gives huge emphasis to how those documents are interconnected. It's like you have users can befriend other users. For example, you can easily say a user is a friend of another user. In a typical database, you have to store that friending information as a document. But in a graph database, that relation itself is an important part of the data definition. So, if you have an application where your users can add each other as friends, and you want to store that information and make it easy to, for example, have a query that says that provides you a timeline, like the Facebook timeline, that pulls in news from all your friends. It's a harder query to construct on a MongoDB database. But on a graph database like Neo4j, it's much easier to access the number of friends and the friends of friends information, and then pull the actual newsfeed from the MongoDB. So there you go. It's a perfect opportunity to combine two different databases.
Okay.
Information. Yeah.
So it's about using the advantages of, for example, SQL style and Mongo style into one app, for example.
Exactly.
Or you use another one, yeah.
Exactly, and it doesn't have to be only databases. You could use web services. For example, you could you could be storing latitude and longitude information, geographical information in a database, and you don't want to store the actual address information. What you could do is query your MongoDB for latitude and longitude, and then query a Google API for the actual address information, like blah blah street. There you go. You don't have to store everything in a single place, because you know that street names may change, and you rely on Google to provide you that information. And what GraphQL makes it easier for you in that sense is combine those two together and let the client not deal with the intricacy in that. Okay?
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, guys, we are actually over our 1 hour. And if you have one more question, let's take that, and then wrap this up.
I have one, if anybody else doesn't. Okay, the thing is, Meteor uses simple strings to identify objects, but MongoDB uses a structure called an object ID for the ID part of records, right?
Yeah.
If I, for example, if I use the desktop application to access my database that a Meteor application uses, and I added a record from that application, the new record will have an object ID field instead of an ordinary string. So how does Meteor behave in that situation? Does it mess things up, or will Meteor just overwrite the records if I update that specific record from the Meteor application?
Okay, well, Nejmettin, you actually hit a nerve there. I mean, that's kind of personal for me. I mean, I even have an issue open on Meteor's GitHub repository about that. And Abigail Watson, hello Abigail. She's a great person from the community. She has done so much for Meteor. It actually had struck a nerve with her too. Well, the thing is, Meteor does allow you to use object IDs instead of regular string ID. Okay, let's give it that. Meteor does support it. So it's perfectly normal for you to structure your app in a way that both the documents inserted by Meteor and the documents inserted by your desktop application talk the same language. Okay, that's fine. The only problem is there are two problems. One of them is rather small. The object ID structure that is generated by MongoDB by default contains a timestamp information, so that MongoDB can provide natural sort order on IDs and making sure the the records that are inserted later on down the line appear later on your lists. Well, the object ID generated by Meteor does not contain that information. It's just a random ID. If that doesn't bother you, check out the Meteor official docs. It tells you on your document construct options to configure your collection to generate IDs using what's called an ID strategy named either Mongo or string. The default is string. So you can change that. The larger problem is the built-in users collection expects the user IDs to be strings because it validates user IDs during login. So if you want to create users from an outside application, yeah, that kind of tricky. That kind of forces you, at least for the users collection, to use string IDs. Luckily, on any application, be it Meteor or whatever it is, all the Node.js drivers allow you to define your own ID. So what you could possibly do is generate a random string, even use the random utility from Meteor to generate IDs on your desktop application to be strings instead of object IDs. So that's another solution. And luckily, again, by tonight's Meteor Night revelations, the accounts system is going to be overhauled. I think the Rocket Chat maintainers are going to be contributing a lot to the account system. So that opens us a chance to use the complete accounts infrastructure on SQL as well, because they are targeting SQL databases there. So that means that the lock-in to string IDs, because of the user collection only, is going away soon, hopefully. So to answer your question, you can use object IDs and string IDs side by side. You can use only object IDs except for the user collection, or you could use only string IDs. What you have to decide is the strategy to go about that. If you want to go about that by generating object IDs by default, you could configure Meteor to do that. If you want to go with using string IDs, you have to make sure your desktop application is configured to use string IDs, or it's somewhat structured to generate its own IDs so that they are strings. So because you don't want to rely on MongoDB to generate the ID there. So that's the gist of it. Good news is you're not stuck with it. You could do whatever you want. There are rough edges, but it's perfectly doable. Okay? Even better news is the rough edges are about to be smoothed out. So, well, I'm really stoked about this night's, Meteor Night talk. I mean, it was really great. Do check it out if you haven't done so. It's really exciting. It really fills me up with joy to know that I'll be able to do so much more with Meteor soon to come. So that's it, guys. I mean, I am really excited to go on with this, but it's like an hour and a half already. So I have to stop. My cleaning lady is just actually giving me looks there. She's going to have to lay down the carpets and all. So I'll have to go and take the range up on any other further questions you might have. Guys, make sure you copy over the chat history here to Slack so you don't lose it.
I make already some.
Great.
notes.
Thank you for that. And if you have any more questions, share it on the Slack channel. Chris, please do share your filtering example with us.
I do.
Yeah, let's work on it together. And okay, so thank you everyone, and thank you Rob again for the great introduction of that tool in MindMeister. That's really valuable.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Yeah.